The pain of losing a loved one can be overwhelming. However, knowing that the life of that loved one was viciously cut short by another is more devastating, and sometimes justice at the hands of the law isn't enough. It's a roller coaster of emotions, so sit back and watch 8 fathers who attacked children's killers in court. 1. Dwayne Smith. When Dwayne Smith was asked to deliver a victim impact statement at the Wayne County Circuit Court in Detroit, Michigan, no one would have expected what his next actions would be. Smith decided to make a different and lasting statement by running up to his daughter's killer and punching him in the head until sheriff deputies had to stop them. Jamila Smith was the 3-year-old daughter of Dwayne Smith, who was living with her mother, Jasmine Gordon, and her boyfriend, Clifford Thomas. According to reports, Thomas had been babysitting Jamila and Jasmine's son while she was at work on September 14, 2014. Later that day, the toddler was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. According to the couple, little Jamila had hit her head and then fell unconscious. However, medical experts soon discovered something wasn't quite right, as the little girl had bruises on her head and chest that indicated physical abuse. Jamila's death was ruled a homicide, and Thomas alongside Gordon's were arrested. Both Gordon and Thomas were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in separate trials, but they had to appear in court at the same time for the victim's impact statement to avoid a repetition. Smith was supposed to address the convicted couple, but instead showed the depths of his pain by attacking the accused killer, dressed in a yellow jail uniform, sitting and facing the judge.
The little girl's biological father, Dwayne Smith, got up to make a victim impact statement in court and then began yelling and punching Thomas, who was awaiting his sentence.
Thomas, on the other hand, didn't seem to be having it and was also lunging forward to fight off Smith, who was yelling at him. Both men had to be separated, and Smith was ordered out of the courtroom. Wayne County Circuit Judge Margaret Van Houten seemed to understand how the father felt as she decided not to hold him in contempt of court, and he was allowed to go without any charges filed against him. However, the commotion led the judge to halt the court proceedings and take a recess. After it ended, Smith was allowed to return to the courtroom and its proceedings continued. Right before she was sentenced, Gordon appeared very emotional as she asked the judge to give her a less lengthy prison sentence and give her jail time or extended probation. She pleaded for nearly 30 minutes, telling the judge how sad she was at losing her only daughter. "I did the best I could as a mother. I did everything I could to provide for them and keep them safe," said Gordon. "To this day, I feel like I'm living somebody else's nightmare." Her tears didn't stop Judge Houghton from reprimanding her, pointing out a videotaped statement where she mentioned not taking her daughter to the police because she feared that her children would be taken away from her. "I don't know how you didn't know your daughter was being abused," said Van Houten. Gordon apologized to Jamilia's father for the loss of his baby girl, our baby girl, while the child's paternal grandmother, Deborah McAdoo, told the judge that Gordon was a horrible mother who made the mistake of having a stranger babysit her children. "She could have brought my son's daughter to him. This was my only grandchild," she said. At the end, 25-year-old Jasmine Gordon was sentenced to 7 to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter and 14 to 25 years for first-degree child abuse as an aider and abettor. Both sentences are to be served at the same time. 34-year-old Clifford Thomas, on the other hand, was sentenced to 57 months to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter and 1 to 2 years for resisting and obstructing a police officer. 2. Antonio Hughes. Next, we head to an Ohio courtroom where a grieving father was found in contempt of court after he angrily stormed to the front of the courtroom and started hitting the man accused of murdering his 3-year-old son. 22-year-old Deshaun Brown was accused of fatally stabbing his girlfriend, Nitisha Lattimore, and tossing her 3-year-old son, Nilo, the son she had with Antonio Hughes, into the Ohio River. According to the prosecutor's office, Deshaun Brown stabbed Nitisha to death in her home on December 5, 2020, but left her body in her apartment for at least 5 days. On December 6, 2020, he took the innocent 3-year-old Nilo and tossed him into the Ohio River with the toddler still alive. On December 11, 2020, Brown returned to Nitisha's apartment and removed her body from the house using a body bag he ordered from eBay. He took a ride-hailing service to the river and even told the driver that the body bag contained his clothing because he was moving out. Her body wouldn't be discovered until December 12th, when a security guard found it abandoned near the People Bridge. On December 13th, Nilo's stroller and a Paw Patrol blanket with his blood on it were found, but his body was nowhere in sight. A search immediately commenced for his body.
Right now we are covering the shoreline from here all the way to the Great Miami, which is 21 miles. So that's all sectored off, and in each sector we have a team searching along the shoreline.
Brown was arrested and indicted in February 2021 on 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of gross abuse of a corpse, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. While the search for Nilo was ongoing, Brown was in court where prosecutors were trying to find out the motive behind his brutal acts. At first, Hamilton County Prosecutor Joe Dieter said Brown had been planning the murders for months, stating that the duo had some relationship issues, but there was no good excuse for this. However, new information released in court on June 17, 2022, eventually revealed the possible motive.
Tonight, a new motive revealed for the killings of a 3-year-old and his mother. Deshaun Brown is accused of murdering Nitisha Lattimore and her son Nilo in 2020. Reporter Courtney Francisco joins us live now. And Courtney, detectives say this motive could have stemmed from a miscarriage that woman had?
According to detectives, Nitisha had been pregnant with Brown's baby, but she miscarried. Unfortunately, Brown believed she killed his child and decided to seek revenge. Few days after this motive was revealed, Brown appeared in court for a pretrial hearing in the murder case against him. Antonio Hughes, the father of Nilo, whose body was yet to be recovered, was also in court that day. According to surveillance video released by the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, Hughes sneaked up to the defense table where Brown sat facing the judge and grabbed him from behind, repeatedly punching him in the head. 2 sheriff deputies had to wrestle him to the ground before Brown was free from the raining blows to his head. Even after he was back on his feet and handcuffed, Hughes was so enraged that he still tried to attack the defendant by lunging at him. This time it took 4 guards to tackle him to the ground to prevent his attacks. The judge found him in contempt of the court, and Hughes was sentenced to 7 days at the Hamilton County Justice Center. To date, Nilo's body has not been recovered. If Brown is found guilty of the convicted crime, he will be sentenced to death. 3. Van Terry. Van Terry, father of one of the victims of Ohio serial killer Michael Madison, had stepped to the podium to address the court when he suddenly leaped over a table to attack the defendant, who had smirked just minutes after the judge handed him a death sentence. Michael Madison from East Cleveland, Ohio, was first registered as a sex offender in 2002 after serving 4 years for an attempted rape conviction. He also had previous drug convictions in 2000 and 2001. However, no one expected that the sex offender would turn out to be a serial killer who murdered at least 3 women in cold blood over a 9-month period between 2012 and 2013. On July 19, 2013, a cable television worker reported a putrid smell coming from a garage that was leased to Madison. The police responded to this report and discovered the decomposing body of a woman lying inside the garage. She had been wrapped in garbage bags that were sealed close with tape. The following day, 2 more bodies were found, one in the backyard of a house nearby and another in the basement of a vacant house. The bodies of the 3 victims were found 100 yards to 200 yards apart, and each was wrapped in plastic bags. A search warrant was obtained, and the police gained entry into Madison's apartment where they found further evidence of decomposition, and after a brief standoff with the police at his mother's house, Madison was arrested and taken into custody. He claimed that he remembered strangling 2 of the women, but couldn't remember killing the 3rd one.
Chilling headline from East Cleveland. Authorities believe they could very well have a serial killer in custody. 3 bodies found already. Investigators say they've been told by the suspect there could be more, all of them women. Police, the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, all on the scene tonight.
The victims were identified as 28-year-old Shetisha Sheely, who had been missing since September 2012. There was also the 38-year-old Angela Deskins, a resident of Cleveland, who had been missing since June 2013. The 3rd victim was 18-year-old Sherelda Helen Terry, who was last seen leaving a Cleveland elementary school on July 10, 2013. She had a summer job at the school. On July 22, 2013, Madison was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, and his bail was set at $6 million. He also waived his right to a preliminary hearing. However, his indictment was updated and now included 14 counts, 2 counts each of aggravated murder for each victim, 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. His lawyers didn't deny his guilt, but argued for him focusing on his abusive childhood. On October 31, 2013, Madison's attorney entered a not guilty plea after prosecutors announced that they were seeking the death penalty. A trial for the murder cases began on April 4, 2016, and on May 5, 2016, Madison was found guilty in the murders of Sherelda Terry, Angela Deskins, and Shetisha Sheely. On May 20, 2016, the jury recommended that Madison should be sentenced to death. On June 2, 2016, Cuyahoga Common, pleas judge Nancy R. McDonnell, who has never issued the death sentence in more than 20 years on the bench, sentenced Madison to death. She said she was struck by the sheer inhumanity of what one human being can do to not 1, but 3 human beings.
It is the judgment of this court that the aggravated circumstances of course of conduct, felony murder, kidnapping, felony murder, rape, of which the defendant was convicted, outweigh the mitigating factors by proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
She continued by saying,
Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison, on counts 1, 4, and 7.
Right after the sentencing, Van Terry took to the podium to address the courtroom before he suddenly turned around and lunged at the convicted serial killer who had a grin on his lips.
Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown. Who's touched our families, taken my child.
Cuyahoga County courtroom wrestled Terry and tried to hold him back as Madison and his attorney scrambled to get out of the way. At that moment, the courtroom was momentarily in chaos as someone could be heard screaming, "No!" repeatedly, while another person kept yelling Terry continuously. The courtroom deputies were able to drag Terry out of the courtroom while Madison appeared uninjured. The judge refused to clear the courtroom, and after a 15-minute delay, the court proceedings continued and Terry wasn't charged. Madison is currently being held on death row. 4. Willie Clay Fields. Next, we head to the Orangeburg County Courthouse, where some drama seems to be unfolding. A sentence hearing at the South Carolina courtroom momentarily burst into chaos when the bereaved father of an Orangeburg teen who was shot to death attacked the accused killer in open court. Willie Clay Fields was found in contempt of the court after he ran up to 22-year-old Lindy Lamont Jones and delivered multiple punches before he was dragged out of the courtroom by sheriff deputies. The incident occurred on July 14, 2022. Lindy Jones had pleaded guilty to the shooting of 18-year-old Willie Antoine Fields on August 2, 2019. The teen was reported missing by his parents, but the news they would get was one no parent wanted to hear. Antoine Fields' car was located, and investigators discovered that there was blood in the vehicle and its trunk. Upon further investigation, they discovered Fields' body in a wooded area near the car. Jones, who was 19 at the time of the murder, confessed to the crime immediately he was arrested. He stated that he shot Fields once in the head and 3 times in the back. He and his brother, J. Lynn Devanary Jones, 18 at the time, helped dispose of the body. On July 14, 2022, a sentence hearing at the Orangeburg County Courthouse was in place for the accused killer and Angela Fields. The victim's mother had been called to give a statement. While she was delivering an emotional speech, the courtroom devolved into disorder.
Your Honor, I just want to let you know just what they took from me. They took away my only child. It's been so hard.
According to the incident report filed by the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Office, Jones was standing handcuffed in front of the judge with his attorney by his side, awaiting his verdict. Angela Field was speaking on behalf of her family to the judge when her 57-year-old husband at the time ran past a sheriff's deputy and tackled Jones to the ground. Willie Clay Fields landed some punches before he was pulled away by other deputies in the courtroom. As Mr. Fields was pulled back by the courtroom deputies with the officers telling him to back off, Jones was seen trying to get up to his feet. What happened next showed that he perhaps didn't feel remorse for the devious act he had committed, as he was seen rushing towards the bereaved father saying, "I'm going to beat your boy," before he was pulled away from the scene. Mr. Field was held and charged with third-degree assault and battery, which caused his lawyer to release a statement on Facebook explaining the reason behind his client's behavior. No father should have to bury his innocent son. Mr. Fields is not a criminal. He is a victim of the senseless violence that occurs far too often in our communities. The criminal justice system exists so that justice may be done, and justice in this case demands setting Mr. Fields free from the burdens of these charges so that he may continue mourning in peace with his family. We are asking that the system hash free pops, the post read. Mr. Fields and his family are extremely apologetic to the court for his outburst and the court staff and officers who had to step in. Mr. Field wishes that his emotions in the moment had not gotten the best of him, and he wants everyone to know that he is not a bad man. His family and legal team are asking for prayers and continued support in and around the Orangeburg area as the family simply tries to move forward through the grieving process, which has been the most difficult moment of their lives. Just before his sentencing, Jones was allowed to make a statement, and he offered a brief apology to the family of the victims.
I just want to apologize to everybody the day I was today never came. If I can go back and change my decision, I would, but as a man, I understand.
After Jones's statement, the judge immediately proceeded to hand down a verdict.
Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you to the Department of Corrections for a period of 35 years. You'll get credit for the time that you've already served. Good luck to you.
Lindy Lamont Jones was sentenced to 25 years in prison, while Willie Clay Fields, father of the victim, was released on a $1,000 bond. 5. Donald Byrd.
You want to lay in a mental hospital?
Take him out.
You murdered my son, man, for nothing. When he was trying to get away from you, you were trying to get away from you, man. And you kept shooting him while his back was under the truck. You kept shooting him, man. You kept shooting him in his back. His back was turned to you, man. He was trying to get away from you, and you murdered him, man.
There was an outburst in the Miami-Dade County Criminal Court after a distraught father who couldn't contain his anger anymore confronted the man accused of killing his son in court. Donald Byrd, father of Kewan Byrd, was so angry at the convicted criminal that he continued to yell at him till he was dragged out of the courtroom. Lucas Kendall, 26 at the time of the murder, worked as an armed security guard at Club Lex or Rolex, a strip club in Miami. On June 1st, 2012, Kendall arrived at Club Lex for his 11 p.m. shift and was standing beside his truck strapping on his gear for the night, which included a black bulletproof vest with 2 clips and a shiny metal badge, 17-round magazine, a Glock 19, black gloves, and a holster with a nightstick. While he was getting organized, he noticed 2 men sitting inside a gray Ford pickup truck backed into the space next to his own truck. Kendall, also known as Juice, claimed the men were watching him threateningly and were rolling what he assumed was a marijuana joint. After parking his truck, Kendall said he worked over to greet 2 colleagues from Force Protection Security before going back to his truck to retrieve some cigarettes. As he approached his truck, both men who were African Americans suddenly got out of their truck, and according to his claim, one of the men shouted, "I'm gonna kill you," while the driver, Michael Smathers, looked like he might have been pulling something upwards. In what he said was self-defense, Kendall then pulled out his gun and opened fire on both men. He fired at least 3 times into the windshield and continued along the driver's side, where he shot Smathers 4 times. Kewan Byrd, father of 2 who was seated in the passenger seat, fell out of the car onto the asphalt and tried taking cover underneath the truck. According to Kendall, "I pursued the assailant, and when I got into a position to fire, I did again." Kendall couldn't see Byrd's hands and didn't hear gunfire, he said, but "I feared for my life." He kept on shooting, and by the time he was done, Byrd had been shot a total of 8 times with at least 4 shots in his back. Kendall said he thought the men were armed, but investigations revealed both men had no guns with them. By the time both attacked men were taken to the hospital, Byrd was already dead, and Smathers remained in critical condition as he was paralyzed from the waist down. In an interview with Smathers at the hospital, he stated that neither he nor his friend Kewan Byrd said anything to Kendall. According to him, he opened his car door and the guard told him to put his hands up, which he did. In his words, "There were no words even exchanged. We never said a word to this guy at all. The only thing I remember was opening my car door and him telling me to put my hands up." But Kendall pulled out his Glock and started shooting. On June 8, 2012, Kendall was arrested on attempted murder and second-degree murder charges. Later that year, he was diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses, including impulse control disorder and antisocial personality disorder, but medical examiners and a judge deemed him competent to stand trial. At a hearing, Kendall tried to appeal his isolation terms, with an attorney stating it would be best for Kendall to remain in isolation in the hospital instead of jail.
And then the issue is that you want him housed where?
At the same facility he's been housed.
In order to prevent him from decompensating?
Yes, Your Honor. He eventually decompensated to the point where he was sitting in a fetal position, naked, not eating, and not interacting with any human being.
Seeing that the attorney was trying to find a way for Kendall to avoid remaining in jail, Donald Byrd, the victim's father, quickly flew into a rage and confronted the killer.
Yeah, but my son is dead, man. My son is dead. He needs to go to prison. He don't need to be laying no mental hospital. He needs to go to prison, man. Come on, church. He want to play crazy. He wasn't crazy when he murdered my son, man. He wasn't crazy then, but he crazy now. All of a sudden, he crazy now.
He had to be taken out of the courtroom while Kendall looked on. Not betraying any sign of emotion, he decided to act as his own attorney and represent himself at his trial. He told jurors that he was being arrested because he was white. The reason the evidence was fabricated is because I'm white. Despite a warning from the judge, he continued by saying, "The subjects I shot were African American. I can prove that what they're not allowing me to tell you is that I was arrested because of the George Zimmerman shooting." His mother also defended him, saying that his time at the Miami-Dade County Jail was part of the reason why her son became mentally ill. "My son has been terrorized in our system, and for what?" she said. "He is completely innocent of these two attackers. He is the victim. My son is the victim in this whole thing." At his trial, Kendall did not attempt to defend himself by presenting valid evidence, nor did he accept the assistance of his court-appointed standby counsel. He had a criminal history and yet was allowed to work as an armed guard. The jury didn't buy his story, and Kendall was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus another consecutive 30 years in prison. 6. Peter Anderson.
And emotions flared in the courtroom.
This man right here is Peter Anderson, the father of a 5-year-old girl who was murdered by her mother's boyfriend. Overcome by emotions, he leapt at the accused killer as he appeared in the Clark County Superior Court for the first time. On November 2, 2018, at about 5 p.m., Vancouver police responded to a call to the Madison Park Apartments where emergency responders were treating 5-year-old Hartley Anderson's injuries. Her mother, Natasha Luchow, had called 911 after finding her daughter unresponsive. According to reports, 37-year-old Ryan Burge, Natasha's live-in boyfriend at the time, had been babysitting Hartley all day while her sons were at school and she was at work. Burge claimed that Hartley threw a temper tantrum when they left a grocery store. When they got home, he decided to send her to her room, and that was where she banged her head repeatedly against a wall. By the time she was taken to the hospital, the little girl was pronounced dead. A neurosurgeon at the Children's Hospital told a detective that Hartley had suffered a stroke and massive brain swelling. However, he said that the injuries on her head could not be self-inflicted. Burge was then arrested and booked into the Clark County Jail on second-degree murder and was held on $5 million bond. During the first court hearing, members of Hartley's family and friends were seen in the courtroom wearing shirts imprinted with Hartley's photo in the front to show their solidarity with the grieving parents. As soon as Burge was ushered into the courtroom, Hartley's mother, Natasha, could be seen weeping uncontrollably while she was being comforted by those around her. Before the court could proceed with the order of the day, Peter Anderson, father of the dead child, angrily rushed at Burge. Unfortunately, he was unable to throw some punches at the accused killer before he was dragged out of the courtroom by sheriff deputies on the ground. In February 2020, a Clark County Superior Court jury found Burge guilty of the second charge against him, which was second-degree murder, finding that he had killed Hartley Anderson while babysitting her. Burge was also charged with first-degree murder, but the jurors were undecided and instead found him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. They also determined that Burge was guilty of several factors that made his crime heinous, especially as Hartley was vulnerable and he betrayed his position of trust. Despite this conviction, it wasn't enough to erase the heartbreaking feeling of grief the family of Hartley felt. Her grandfather, Tim Luchow, spoke to news reporters and expressed how sad he felt following the death of his granddaughter.
I'll never get to see her graduate from high school or be married or anything. He took that from us. He took the joy we had with her away. I just hope the system works.
Luchow's co-worker Lisa Balch helped the family pass out the black t-shirts with Hartley's photo on the front and also helped them take donations for the family. She also had something to say about the case.
At our Halloween party at work on Wednesday, and I got my last hug from her. It's heartbreaking to see someone go through all this.
Eventually, Burge was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the killing of 5-year-old Hartley while he was babysitting her. Due to COVID-19 precautions, the sentencing took place virtually as Burge appeared via video to hear his verdict. During the process of handing down her sentence, Clark County Superior Court Judge Jennifer Snyder said that she didn't think Burge had taken accountability or responsibility at all, especially after he declined to make a statement. In addition to the 40-year sentence, Burge was also ordered to serve 36 months of community custody and must undergo anger and substance abuse treatment. He is also not allowed to have contact with children younger than 12. 7. Juan Lopez.
A fight breaks out during the arraignment of a murder suspect.
Next, let's take a look at the chaos happening at the Hartford Superior Court, where family members of a 16-year-old murder victim tried to attack the convicted killer. The victim's father, Juan Lopez, and his brother, Jose Lopez, tried to attack 22-year-old Isaiah Benitez, who was accused of fatally shooting Felipe Lopez. The victim was a former student of Windsor High School and was also the father of a 7-month-old daughter. He was killed just 2 days before his 17th birthday. On April 24, 2019, police received a 911 call shortly before before 1 a.m. reporting a crash at the intersection of Albany Avenue and Sigourney Street. The call said that a vehicle went through the traffic light on Sigourney Street, crossed Albany Avenue before crashing into a parked vehicle in the driveway lot of a church. By the time police arrived at the scene, they discovered an unresponsive young man in the driver's seat of the car. He was suffering from at least one gunshot wound. Police would later discover that the young driver was 16-year-old Felipe Lopez from Windsor. According to information obtained from the warrant for Benitez's arrest, police discovered a silver iPhone in the center console of the 1998 Nissan Altima Felipe was driving when he was shot alongside a plastic bag containing marijuana. With no witnesses at the time of the shooting or evidence showing who the killer was, the police had no option than to crack the password on the phone. That was when they discovered a message through Facebook Messenger that had been sent around 12:30 a.m. on the day of the shooting. Lopez had contacted a certain Hennessy Kaylani who wanted to buy marijuana. Lopez agreed to deliver the dime bag to Sigourney Street where the person would meet him in 5 minutes. The police were then able to track the username to Isaiah Benitez, who shared the Facebook account with the mother of his children. He confessed to the crime and turned himself into the police on April 26th. According to his claim, he told the young Spanish boy he was here to buy the weed, at which time the boy grabbed his left arm. Perhaps in self-defense, Benitez pulled out a gun he had hidden in his waistband with his right arm and shot the boy 2 times. Benitez told police that he watched the car speed across Albany Avenue and crash in the driveway of the church. Seeing that, he then ran through the rear yards to a house on Kent Street. Police and family believe that Felipe Lopez may have been trying to drive himself to the hospital before he crashed. He died at St. Francis Hospital and Medical Center not long after 1 a.m. At an arraignment for Benitez, Lopez's family appeared in court, and all seemed to be going well before Juan Lopez and Felipe's brother tried attacking the accused killer. Although the actual action wasn't captured on camera, here is how the drama unfolded at the court.
Police quickly rush out Isaiah Benitez, and the courtroom temporarily went into lockdown. You don't see all the action because of court rules on what we're allowed to show inside. Felipe's father and brother were temporarily detained.
A half-dozen judicial marshals and Isaiah Benitez's public defender had to place themselves between the defendant and the victim's family to avoid further attack. Benitez was rushed back into a holding cell while marshals held down Juan and Jose Lopez, and at the same time shoving family and friends out of the courtroom. After he was handcuffed and placed on a bench, Juan Lopez began to sob, saying, "He killed my son! He killed my son! He was just a boy! He didn't do nothing to nobody!" Benitez was taken back into custody and his bail was set at $1.5 million. 8. Rick Kaufman. An angry father had to be escorted out of a Tennessee courtroom after he attempted to attack the men who had murdered his daughter. On December 3, 2020, 26-year-old Caitlin Kaufman, a Nashville nurse, was on her way to work at the St. Thomas Ascension West Hospital when she was fatally shot by Devonte Hill. 21-year-old at the time, Devonte Hill had been traveling alongside 28-year-old James Cowan in a car when the former shot at the nurse. Days after, Devonte Hill was arrested for the shooting.
Nashville police say a man has been arrested for the murder of a nurse shot and killed on her way to work. Police say they arrested 21-year-old Devonte Lewis Hill this morning. He faces charges of criminal homicide. They say Hill admitted to involvement in the killing of St. Thomas West nurse Caitlin Kaufman.
Cowan was also arrested, and the two were charged with first-degree murder. At a court hearing, Caitlin's father, Rick Kaufman, who was emotional with grief, tried to attack the two men but was stopped before he could get to where they were seated.
Just seconds after the defendants were brought into the courtroom, the victim's father had to be physically escorted out of the courtroom, while the victim's mother sat in one of the benches and cried.
At first, Hill lied, claiming that he was in Atlanta with an unnamed woman when the shooting happened. Also, when he was shown a photo of Cowan, he denied knowing him. However, the case took a different turn in January 2023 when Hill decided to explain his point of view at his trial in Davidson County Judge Angelita Blackshear Dalton's courtroom. When he was called to the witness stand, the first thing Hill said was, "I did it. I wasn't thinking." According to Hill, on that day he was in Hermitage to see his brother and had smoked marijuana, did a little cocaine, and even popped a Xanax. Cowan, who was with him, wanted to go pick his girlfriend from work, so the duo traveled together with Hill in the passenger seat. "When we was riding, she came from the left of us and just like cut us off," Hill testified. "Cowan hit the brakes and it startled me. I remember picking up the gun and firing the shots, but I couldn't recall in that moment how many shots I'd fired," he said. A Metro Parks officer had been the one to discover a Mazda SUV on the right shoulder against the guardrail, and assuming the driver had crashed, he approached to help. Instead, they found Kaufman already dead from a gunshot wound. Detectives said 6 rounds were fired into her vehicle. When he was asked asked if Cowan had anything to do with the shooting, Hill testified that he didn't. He mentioned that an hour and a half after the shooting, he searched Nashville shooting on his phone, and that was when he learned that someone had died. He started to panic and began to take more drugs in a bid to cope with the situation. Hours after the shooting occurred, Hill sent a message to a friend wanting to trade away the murder weapon. However, he gave the pistol to his childhood friend, Jacques Merrill Odom, in exchange for another. It was Merrill Odom who eventually turned him in to the authorities. That same month, Cowan was acquitted by the Davidson County Court jury.
State of Tennessee versus James Edward Cowan, Devontae Lewis Hill. We, the jury, find the defendant James Edward Cowan not guilty. We, the jury, find the defendant Devontae Lewis Hill guilty of second-degree murder.
After the verdict was read, the Kaufman family and state prosecutors left the courtroom without a comment. On March 3, 2023, Hill appeared in court for his sentencing.
The man who killed a nurse in an apparent road rage shooting got the maximum sentence today. A jury found Devontae Hill guilty of second-degree murder in January. He admitted to shooting Caitlin Kaufman after he claimed she cut off the car he was in. According to the district attorney, the judge gave him 25 years in prison.
Devontae was going to spend more than 2 decades in prison before he would ever become a free man. Again, after watching this emotional video of 8 fathers who attacked their children's killers in court, one thing is certain: the pain of losing a loved one can be heart and mind altering. While the actions of these fathers may be considered brash, there's really no telling people how to express pain. If you like this video, click on the cards showing on your screen for more awesome videos like this.